Fine-tuning used to feel like a punishment. You wanted one model that understood your product, your code base, your style, your documents, your weird internal rules, and the price was pain. CUDA errors, VRAM limits, notebooks that worked yesterday and exploded today. Training runs that died at 97%, and then Unsloth shows up and basically says, what if this was just not that hard? That is why I think Unsloth is one of the most important AI developer tools right now. Not because it has a cute name, not because it makes a benchmark graph look better, but because it attacks the most annoying part of custom AI, the part where fine-tuning stops being an idea and becomes a hardware problem. Unsloth is fast. Unsloth is efficient. Unsloth supports a ridiculous number of models. And in the very specific world of training open models on hardware that normal developers can actually touch, I think Unsloth is the default now. Honestly, I think everything else has to explain why it is not using Unsloth. That is the level of opinion I have on this. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this. Now, back to the video. For the last year, developers have been told two contradictory things. First, open models are the future, run them locally. Own your stack, customize them, stop sending every prompt to one giant cloud model. Then, immediately after that, the same ecosystem tells you, actually fine-tuning is complicated, you need the right GPU, you need the right CUDA version, you need the right attention backend, you need the right quantization, you need the right trainer, you need enough memory, you need to understand LoRa, you need to understand QLoRa, you need to understand why your loss is broken, you need to understand why your dataset is silently terrible. So the dream is simple, but the path is miserable. That is the gap Unsloth fills. It does not make model training magically free. It does not make a bad dataset good. It does not turn a weak base model into a frontier model, but it does something almost as valuable. It takes the worst engineering friction in fine-tuning and removes a shocking amount of it. And that changes who gets to participate. Before tools like this, fine-tuning felt like something serious teams did after they had money. GPUs, patience, and someone willing to read error logs for a living. With Unsloth, it starts to feel like something a normal developer can actually try. That sounds smaller than it is. It is not the moment. Fine-tuning becomes accessible. A lot of AI workflows stop looking like subscriptions and start looking like software. The headline number from Unsloth is simple: train hundreds of models up to 2 times faster with up to 70% less VRAM. That is the kind of claim that sounds like marketing until you remember what VRAM does to this entire category. VRAM is the wall, not vibes, not ambition, not how many tabs you have open about agents. VRAM, if the model and training state do not fit, the answer is no, or the answer is rent a bigger GPU, or the answer is reduce the batch size until the run becomes painfully slow. Or the answer is spend the weekend discovering that your training setup is technically possible, but practically awful. So when a tool says it can cut memory use dramatically, that is not just a speed improvement. That is a permission slip. It means a smaller card can train something useful. It means the GPU you already own might be enough. It means the cloud instance you rent can be cheaper. It means your experiment can finish today instead of becoming a budget conversation. This is why Unsloth feels unfair. It is not merely doing the same job faster. It is moving the boundary of what counts as possible. That is the difference between an optimization and a platform shift. The normal fine-tuning stack is powerful, but it often feels like a bag of sharp objects. You have PyTorch, you have transformers, you have PEFT, you have bits and bytes. You have attention implementations, you have trainer classes, you have model-specific quirks, you have data formatting, you have export formats, you have inference engines. Every piece is understandable on its own. Together, they can become exhausting. Unsloth wins because it understands the actual user problem. The problem is not, can I theoretically assemble the fastest possible training stack from first principles? The problem is, can I fine-tune this model without becoming the full-time maintainer of my own machine learning infrastructure? That is a very different question, and Unsloth answers it better than almost anything else in the open model world. It wraps the annoying parts, it patches models, it uses custom kernels, it supports common training paths like LoRa and QLoRa, it helps with full fine-tuning, reinforcement learning, pre-training, 4-bit, 16-bit, and FP8 workflows, and it does all of this while staying close to the ecosystem developers already use. That matters. The best tool is not always the one with the most theoretical control. The best tool is the one that gets you from idea to trained model before your motivation evaporates. Unsloth is brutally good at that. A lot of AI tooling feels impressive because it adds more UI, more agents, more orchestration, more dashboards, more abstraction. Unsloth is interesting because its best tricks are often about removing waste. Wasted memory, wasted padding, wasted computation, wasted setup time, wasted money. That is less glamorous, but it is exactly where fine-tuning gets stuck. For example, one of Unsloth's newer training improvements focuses on packing and padding. Real datasets are messy, some examples are short. Some are long. If you batch them badly, the system pads shorter examples out to match longer ones. That means a GPU is doing work on empty space. That is absurd when you say it out loud. You paid for a GPU and now part of the training run is processing nothing. Unsloth attacks that kind of waste directly. Its docs describe training becoming typically around 3 times faster with newer kernels and packing improvements, with memory reductions that can be substantial. That is the kind of improvement that actually matters because developers do not need one more philosophical argument about open models. They need a run that finishes. They need a model that fits. They need a notebook that does not punish them for trying. Unsloth is not just faster in the benchmark sense, it is faster in the human sense. Less time lost to nonsense. The other reason Unsloth is hard to beat is model coverage. If it only worked with one neat little family of models, the story would be smaller, useful, but smaller. Instead, Unsloth supports hundreds of models across the names developers actually care about: Llama, Qwen, Gemma, Mistral, DeepSeek, Phi, vision models, reasoning models, mixture of experts models, coding models. That matters because the open model world changes constantly. The best model this month may not be the best model next month. The model with the best license may not be the model with the best coding behavior. The model that fits on your GPU may not be the one Twitter is screaming about today. So a fine-tuning tool has to move with the model ecosystem. Unsloth does. That is why it feels less like a niche optimization library and more like the training layer for practical OpenAI. It gives you a way to follow the model wave without rebuilding your whole workflow every time a new release drops. And that is exactly what developers need, because open models are chaotic. The winning workflow is not picking one sacred model and defending it forever. The winning workflow is being able to adapt quickly. Unsloth makes that much easier. Mixture of experts models are becoming more important. They are also annoying. A mixture of experts model does not use every part of the network for every token. It routes work through selected experts. That can make large models more efficient at inference time, but it also creates new training complexity. And this is where Unsloth has been unusually aggressive. Its MOE work claims up to 12 times faster training compared with older common setups, with more than 35% less VRAM in specific cases. That is not a tiny improvement. That is the difference between I might try fine-tuning this and absolutely not. My hardware will melt emotionally. The important part is not just the number, the important part is the direction. The model ecosystem is not getting simpler. We are not going back to one clean transformer shape forever. We are getting MOE, we are getting longer context, we are getting multimodal models, we are getting reasoning training, we are getting weird architectures, we are getting more specialized models that are powerful but awkward. So the fine-tuning layer has to handle weirdness. That is another reason I'm so bullish on Unsloth. It is not waiting for the world to become simple. It is optimizing for the messy world we actually have. Unsloth also matters because local AI is not only about chatting with a model on your laptop. That is the beginner version. The more interesting version is, can you build a model that behaves the way your workflow needs? Can you teach a coding model your project style? Can you train a support model on your product language? Can you adapt a smaller model for one boring internal task so you stop paying a giant model to do it? Can you create a private assistant that knows your documents without sending everything away? That is where fine-tuning becomes valuable. Prompting is useful, retrieval is useful, long context is useful, but sometimes you do not want to keep explaining the same pattern over and over. Sometimes you want the model itself to learn the shape of the answer. That is fine-tuning territory. And when fine-tuning gets easier, local AI gets much more serious because local AI without customization is often just, can I run a generic model privately? Fine, cool, useful. But local AI with practical customization becomes, can I create a smaller, cheaper, private model that is actually tuned for the job? That is a much bigger deal. That is where Unsloth earns the hype. It makes a serious version of local AI feel less distant. There is a lazy answer to every AI problem right now. Use a bigger model. Bad output, bigger model. Weak reasoning, bigger model. Wrong style, bigger model. Messy instruction following, bigger model. And yes, sometimes that works. Frontier models are incredible. Pretending they are not would be silly, but bigger is not the same as better for every job. If your task is narrow, repetitive, private, and high volume, a tuned smaller model can be the smarter answer. Not because it has more general intelligence, because it has the exact behavior you need. That is the part people miss. A smaller custom model does not have to beat a frontier model at everything. It only has to beat it at your thing. Your labels, your format, your routing decision, your coding convention, your support response, your document type, your internal checklist. And if it does that cheaply, quickly, and privately, then who cares if the giant model wins a general benchmark? This is why Unsloth is so interesting. It supports the shift from general AI worship to practical AI ownership. The question stops being, what is the smartest model I can rent, and becomes, what is the most useful model I can shape? That is a much healthier question. Now, this is where I have to be careful, because Unsloth being great does not mean fine-tuning is magic. The dataset is still the boss. If your examples are bad, your fine-tuned model will be bad faster. If your labels are inconsistent, your model will learn inconsistency. If your data contains the wrong behavior, the model will politely automate the wrong behavior. Unsloth can make training faster. It can make memory use lower, it can make the workflow easier, it can make export and iteration more realistic, but it cannot decide what your model should become. That is still your job, and honestly, that is a good thing, because the valuable part of fine-tuning is not pressing the train button. The valuable part is knowing what behavior you want, collecting examples of that behavior, and checking whether the model actually learned it. Unsloth makes the mechanical part less painful. It does not remove the thinking. That is why I like it. It is not selling the fantasy that developers can ignore the hard part. It is removing the boring hard part so developers can focus on the useful hard part. That is exactly what good tooling should do. Unsloth also has a broader play now with Unsloth Studio. That matters because a lot of people who could benefit from custom models do not want to live inside training scripts. They have documents, they have CSV files, they have product data, they have examples, they have a task. But they do not want to become a machine learning engineer just to test whether a local model can learn their workflow. Studio pushes Unsloth toward a more approachable interface for running and training models. That is important, not because every developer needs a graphical interface, but because the future of fine-tuning cannot be reserved for people who enjoy debugging notebooks. If custom models are going to matter, the workflow has to be easier. You need to load data. You need to inspect it. You need to train. You need to monitor loss. You need to compare outputs. You need to export the model. You need to run it in the places you actually work. Unsloth is moving in that direction. And that is one more reason I think it is ahead. It is not just optimizing kernels in a corner, it is trying to make the whole custom model loop feel less hostile. A lot of AI tools are great until you ask the obvious question. Now what? You train the model? Great. Where does it run? Can you export it? Can you use it with Ollama? Can you use it with VLLM? Can you upload it to Hugging Face? Can you serve it behind an API? Can your coding tools talk to it? Can it become part of an actual workflow instead of a notebook souvenir? This is another place where Unsloth is strong. It is not treating training as the whole story. The whole story is choose a base model, prepare data, train, evaluate, export, run, connect, iterate. That last part matters. A fine-tuned model that never leaves the notebook is not a product. It is a science fair project. Unsloth understands that developers want the trained model to go somewhere. GUFO Llama, VLLM, Hugging Face, local API, S agent tools, that is the correct shape, because the point of training is not to say you train something, the point is to use it. So when I say Unsloth is better than everything, I do not mean it replaces every tool in the universe. That would be nonsense. PyTorch still matters, Transformer still matters, Hugging Face still matters, inference engines still matter, evaluation tools still matter, data tooling still matters. The point is narrower and stronger. For practical fine-tuning of open models, especially when memory, speed, and setup pain matter, Unsloth is the tool I would bet on first. It gives normal developers a fighting chance. It makes small hardware feel less small. It makes experiments cheaper. It makes iteration faster. It supports the models people actually want to try. And it is clearly optimizing for the ugly parts of the workflow, not just the impressive parts. That is why the competition has a problem. If another stack makes you write more code, burn more memory, wait longer, and fight more setup problems, it needs a very good reason. Control can be a reason. Research flexibility can be a reason. Existing infrastructure can be a reason. But for a developer trying to get a custom model trained without turning the project into a week of pain, Unsloth is hard to argue against. It is not just good, it is annoyingly good. The best use case is not fine-tune a model and hope it becomes a genius. That is how people waste time. The best use case is narrow behavior. Take a smaller model and teach it one domain. Teach it your support style. Teach it your bug report categories. Teach it your code review comments. Teach it your JSON format. Teach it your internal docs. Teach it the kind of answer your product actually needs. Then evaluate that one behavior brutally. Does it follow the format? Does it hallucinate less? Does it answer faster? Can it run locally? Can it replace a more expensive model for this specific task? Can it handle the boring work without calling a frontier model every time? That is where the economics get interesting, not replacing every AI model. Replacing repeated expensive calls with a tuned cheap model. That is not hype. That is software engineering. You take a general tool and specialize it until it is cheaper, faster, and easier to trust for one job. Unsloth makes that pattern much more realistic. There is still a catch. Fine-tuning is not always the right move. Sometimes prompting is enough. Sometimes retrieval is better. Sometimes a larger model is cheaper than the engineering time. Sometimes you do not have enough good examples. Sometimes the behavior you want changes too often. Sometimes evaluation is the real bottleneck, not training. And if you skip evaluation, you can fool yourself very quickly. A model can sound better while being worse. It can match your style while losing accuracy. It can become more confident about the wrong answer. It can overfit to examples that looked clean but were secretly narrow. Unsloth does not remove that risk. No fine-tuning tool does. But this is exactly why I like it more. Because when training is slow and painful, people avoid iteration. They run one experiment. They squint at the output. They declare victory. That is bad. When training is faster and cheaper, you can iterate properly. You can try a smaller dataset. You can fix the examples. You can compare a base model against a tuned model. You can test a different model family. You can throw away the run that did not work. Good fine-tuning is iteration. Unsloth makes iteration less expensive. That is the entire game. The AI industry keeps trying to pull developers toward bigger centralized models, more tokens, more subscriptions, more managed platforms, more hidden routing, more monthly bills. Unsloth points in the other direction: smaller models, local hardware, custom behavior, cheaper experiments, more control, less wasted compute. That is why this tool matters. It is part of a larger shift from rendering intelligence to shaping it. That sounds dramatic, but it is practical. Every team has repetitive language work. Every codebase has style. Every product has rules. Every support queue has patterns. Every developer has tasks that do not need the smartest model on earth. They need the right model shaped for the job. And if tools like Unsloth keep improving, that becomes normal. Not special, not a research project, not something only large companies can afford. Normal. That is the future I care about. Not every developer training a giant model from scratch. Every developer being able to customize a capable open model when it makes sense. That is a much better world than blindly renting the biggest model for every tiny task. So yes, I'm biased here. I think Unsloth is really, really good. I think it is one of the clearest examples of AI tooling that actually respects the developer's time. It makes fine-tuning faster. It makes memory limits less brutal. It supports the model families people actually want. It is expanding from code into a fuller training and running workflow. And most importantly, it makes custom open models feel possible for normal people. That is the win. Not hype, not branding, not another abstract argument about OpenAI. Just a tool that takes one of the most painful parts of the stack and makes it dramatically less painful. That is rare. And when a tool does that, I do not think the right reaction is cautious neutrality. The right reaction is simple: pay attention.